All right, to get started, one of the first things we have to do is safely raise the front of the truck by the frame so the suspension's hanging. After that, remove all 5 lug nuts and then the wheel. With the wheels off, we're going to follow our ABS wire up and behind here, and we're going to disconnect it. Go ahead and grab this tab, lift it up, and slide it out. It's always a good idea to check for any corrosion. If you see some, you need to take care of it. The next thing we need to do is remove this from the frame. I'm just going to use a little fork tool. You can use a pry bar, screwdriver, whatever you've got. Pop that out of there. Now we need to continue on to dismounting any of the mounting points that you can see for the ABS wire. Now the next thing we're going to do is just go ahead and get our cotter pin out for our outer tie rod end and then remove that tie rod end nut. We're going to separate the tie rod end from the knuckle. We're going to do that by hitting right on the knuckle with our hammer. Now we're going to pivot this and then we're going to remove our caliper mounting bolts. And grab onto that caliper. We're going to hang this aside so it's putting no pressure on our flex hose. Now let's get our rotor off. Now it's going to be time to unscrew our upper ball joint nut. So now the next thing we need to do is use our hammer, and we're going to bonk along this area here to try to break the upper ball joint free from the knuckle itself. There we are. That was easy. All right, so now we're just going to go ahead and put a jack underneath the control arm to apply a little bit of pressure. That way there we can remove this nut. Okay, now the next thing we have to do is go ahead and hold on to this upper area of the sway bar link. That's essentially the nut. And then we're going to come under here with our socket and remove the shaft of the sway bar link. All right, so ours broke. That makes it a little bit easier. We'll just go ahead and pop the rest of that right out of there. Easy peasy. Now the sway bar link should essentially come apart, and then all your bushings and everything come apart separate as well. Typically, with the age of these vehicles, they're going to end up breaking. If that's the case, you have to go ahead and replace the sway bar link. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is come right down here to the lower aspect of the shock. We're going to go ahead and hold onto the nut that's on the inside, and then we'll remove the bolt from the outside. Now we're just going to put a jack underneath the control arm and carefully lift it up so we can remove our bolt. Let's lower that back down. Okay, so now we need to move along to the upper aspect of the shock. I'm just going to go ahead and move this out of the way. Ours is in poor condition, so I can do this. Now the bolt is going to come through from the front to the rear. So the nut's going to be on the back side here, and the bolt is going to be from the forward side. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to hold onto the bolt, and then I'm going to remove the nut. Just going to wiggle the shock around so I can move the bolt. We'll remove that. Now that we have both those mounting bolts out, let's go ahead and give this a wiggle and remove it from the truck. There it is, friends. So now we're just going to take a look underneath here. You're going to see that you have another bounce bumper here. Up along the top, you're going to have the mounting nut, and then this area right here is where the holding point is going to be. So I'm just going to reach under, hold it up, and then I'm going to remove this nut. There it is. Let's go ahead and put this aside so we can install it into our new control arm. To remove this nut, what you're going to notice is that your brake hose is going to be in the way. Our hose is not in here right now, but essentially if you were to come right behind it, you're going to remove this bolt. Just use a wrench. We'll go ahead and unscrew that completely. As you remove it, just keep pulling the hose and the bracket with the bolt, and then of course you can just move it out of the way. There's that one. Now let's just give this a wiggle and remove it from the truck. There it is, friends. Okay, friends, now it's time to get our brand new control arm in here. We're going to take our cam kit, hold it in our hand. We'll slide the bushings right into the area on the frame where it's supposed to mount. Just going to go ahead and tap it in. All right, now it's going to be time to put in our cam bolts. I like to put a little bit of copper never seize along the shafted area here, and then some red thread locker on the threaded area. Let's come from the inside, work our way towards the outside. our cam adjuster on here. Locking washer if you've got one. And then of course your locking nut. Okay, so now we're gonna use a wrench on the bolt side and we're gonna turn it so the cam is pretty much dead center. So essentially the flat part of the bolt is facing straight up. As we do that, we'll just go ahead and snug this nice and easy. Now we'll do the same to the other side. And then once we've done that, we'll bring this up so it's pretty much sitting at the level that it would be if it was on the ground. And then we'll go ahead and snug them up and torque them. Okay, so now, like I said, what we're gonna do is put the control arm so it's facing pretty much in the direction as if we had the wheel on the ground. So the control arm isn't gonna be sitting like this, it's gonna be sitting approximately like that with the ball joint parallel to the ground. Once you have that set up, let's also center the cam adjustment point right here. That looks good. Now we're gonna torque it to 85 foot-pounds. Now let's do the same to the other side. Okay, so now it's gonna be time to put on our little bumper. This is gonna go underneath the control arm, and then you're gonna have your stud with the other piton. They're gonna line up right under here. So essentially you wanna come right up here, and then you'll take your nut, go ahead and put it on and tighten it up. Ours is broken, so I'm gonna replace this at a later date. Now it's gonna be time to get the shock in here. Let's go under that control arm, right up along the top. Now we're gonna take one of our control arm bolts, come through from the front, and then go through the hole and out through the rear. Let's go ahead and jack up that lower control arm a little bit. Take our other bolt, put that right through there. All right, now I'm just gonna go ahead and snug this up. Now let's go ahead and torque this to 54 foot-pounds. Do the same to the lower. Be time to put in our sway bar link. Firstly, we want to, of course, take it apart. Okay, we'll get it apart to this point. So you're gonna have your bolt, a washer, and then the bushing. It's gonna come through right here. We're gonna put on our next bushing. When you do these, you want the flat area or the area with the bevel facing down towards the area that's gonna be going against. Another washer after the bushing, spacer, washer, bushing. Here we go with the bushing again. Get the rounded area, and then you got the area with the piton. That's gonna face up here. Okay, bushing again. Perfect. And snug this up. Now let's go ahead and torque this to 11 foot-pounds. Perfect. Next, what I'm gonna do is use a nice long pry bar. I'm gonna come underneath this ridge right here and across the control arm. The reason for that is because I wanna bring this down and put the stud into the knuckle itself. After we've done that, we'll go ahead and start on our ball joint nut, snug it up, and then tighten it to manufacturer specifications. So now we're just gonna continue snugging this up, and then we're gonna torque it to 61 foot-pounds. If for some reason when you torque this, it wasn't perfectly lined up, you would wanna continue tightening until the very next slot does line up with the ball joint hole. So next we're gonna move back over to our original upper control arm. What you're gonna notice is that you have the bracket located right along this area for the ABS wire. Your new control arm isn't going to have the bracket on it yet, so what we're going to do is we're going to continue on by cutting off this rivet and then removing it. Let's go ahead and get that off of there. Let's put this on the new control arm. So now I'm going to take that bracket with a brand new bolt and a nut, and I'm going to come right through here. Then of course we'll start the nut on and snug it up. Get on there, let's continue on to putting on our ABS wire, and of course the nut, we'll snug that up as well. So now we're going to go ahead and get our bracket back on here. Like I said before, yours is still going to have the hose and the line attached to it, ours does not. But essentially, just go ahead and put it back into its mounting hole, and then you're going to have this area that goes on to that other hole. Let's go ahead and line it up. We'll start this in, and then we'll snug it up. Now let's go ahead and secure the flex hose to the control arm itself. I'm going to take my bolt, go through from the inside, come through the hole, and then of course we'll put our nut on there and tighten it up. Now let's go ahead and connect in our ABS wire. Give it a nice click, make sure it's secured, and then we're going to put it into its mounting point. There we are. We'll just go ahead and put this right into its mounting point as well. All right, so now the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you clean up the mating surface on your hub and on the back side of your rotor, basically the places where they're going to be touching against each other when we put them back together. Add a little bit of copper never sees. Let's go ahead and get our rotor on there. And then of course I like to use a lug nut just to hold the rotor so it doesn't wobble around on me. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get our caliper on. Slide that right over. Now we're going to put in both of our caliper mounting bolts. Okay, nice and tight. Let's install the outer tie rod end to the knuckle. Go ahead and snug this up, and then we'll torque it to 35 foot-pounds. So now that we have it torqued, something that you want to pay attention to is the stud of the tie rod to the slot on the nut. Essentially, we want it to match up so we can put in our cotter pin. If for some reason it doesn't, continue tightening until the very next slot does. Go ahead and peen over that cotter pin so there's no way the tie rod nut can come loose. Let's go ahead and get our wheel on here, start all of our lug nuts, snug them up, and then get the wheel on the ground, torque it to 100 foot-pounds. All right, let's torque these to 100. Torqued. If you have your little lug covers, go ahead and throw those on as well. Okay friends, so we got the job complete. Now all you have to do is go ahead and pump up your brake, check your brake fluid, and then of course get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop.